came out, believe me.
I hear the hostel in this town.
I went there yesterday to see.
This town, off the square where we parked, right?
I got a brochure and I got the car. Here came in 1959. What happened was people were traveling on the cheap, obviously. Ken Tate, Luke.
The early origins.
Because by chance, Ken Tate, who at the time was in his mid-40s, had left Rhodesia, traveled around, he was in the middle of a divorce. Alan Rankin had quit Pan Am after 5 years, wasn't interested anymore in working for a corporation. Luke was very much, Luke Vanderkay was very much at loose ends, had a degree in agriculture, but obviously that was not where he was going to spend the rest of his life. And they all traveled independently. They met up at the Casa Campello in Spain, just north of Alicante, and they decided, if John can do it, we can do it. Let's do something. Here we are, 3 guys, rather disparate personalities, to tell you the truth. I mean, they had nothing in common practically. But they decided, what the heck, you know? So then, as I mentioned before, I arrived after they left, just 3 days, and I stayed 5 months. So I had heard there was a plan afoot to open something up. And when Ken Tate returned to Casa Campello, he had just left Alan. They had visited Lausanne just to see what was afoot. This would have been the spring of 1960, okay? And then Alan and I met in May of 1960. We wrote to each other, we traveled a tiny, tiny bit, and we kept in contact. And I took an enormous interest in this idea. In my very first conversation with Alan, I said, when I heard about this, I'll cook. Little did I know. And then Alan and I corresponded in the autumn of 1960, and it was still a toss-up to go to Spain. I wrote to Alan in Spain, who had returned to Spain in the autumn of 1960. He was back at this Casa Campello. And I wrote and said, I've got the letters at my office, forget about Spain. Let's go where the air is fresh. Let's go where it's high. And that's when we talked about it for several months, or wrote to each other, and that's when I thought we should definitely start now. And we had as I mentioned, a young man with his bus. We got some people going. Had we not started, this is where fate and timing comes in, had we not started in January of 1961, we would not have had the Vagabond, because a law went through about 2 months later called the Lex Fergle. Lex meaning law, it was Fergle's law. Foreigners could not buy in Switzerland with a certain dimension or business or whatever, but it was very much because too many wealthy foreigners were buying property and the Swiss couldn't afford it. Property prices were rising. So because Alan and Ken had already made a foothold in Lausanne, and because Alan and I were there in January of 61, the road was still open for us. Had we not gone then, and Ken was not too keen at it at first. He preferred, coming from Rhodesia, warmer weather. Obviously, snow is not his thing. Luke had already pulled out for a short while. He didn't come in till a bit later. But the fact that we did start, we loaded up a bus, stopped in Amsterdam, filled it up with margarine, dried milk, oatmeal, and all the bits and pieces on a budget to start our little chalet.
We had a white balance problem. We need to start over.
No problem.
Okay, so, back. I'm struck by the bonds, friendships that you all have after all these years.
No,
Can you explain that?
Yes, you're quite right. They're amazing. I think people, all of us who have formed these friendships are still amazed ourselves, because there is deep feeling between us. We all worked hard. There was no two ways about it. And there was something going on. Worked hard during the day. A lot of the guys worked on ski lifts. The girls were all our cleaning girls. We had a staff of 25. And so everybody had a job to do. In the night, of course, it was for relaxation, so we could laugh, find out what happened. And a lot of these people wrote us postcards when they traveled. We wrote them back. They sent us birth announcements. We sent ours. And the whole thing, it was all with a tremendously open and good-naturedness about it. That's what's so incredible. I can think of dozens that I would love to see now. I have a little list with some addresses that are correct, emails and what have you, of about 200 in my office that I would gladly see again. Gladly hope they come through. And they intermingle. They have huge groups together. Like Don, who's at the Vagabond now, who painted the mural for us. Him and he's in with a guy who was with us for a wee while, Don Christian. They're great friends. They go and visit each other during the holidays. There are dozens that intermingle still. They keep in contact with each other. I think that, it's a great feeling. Explain, where the showers were, where the toilets were, the toilet on each floor. Well, when we bought this place in '61, there was one bath.
Oh no.
And but a sink in every room. And the rooms were cleaned. It was very well kept up. The cleaning girls did a good job. Rooms were cleaned every day. Sinks done, waste paper basket emptied, tidied up. Yes. And no, the place was clean.
Maybe talking about why you guys left, why you sold it. We haven't covered that much, have we?
Am I still on?
Or are you on?
You're on right now.
Oh.
I just turned you on.
Anyway, I think sometimes circumstances change. My children were coming to an age where school was getting to be rather important. They were, when I left in '78, they were at that time 11, 13, and 15. And Scott was in a very modest little boarding school just across, just here, you could practically see it from here, and near the Dontamadi, in that area. And he was there for a couple of years. They decided, because he was having a little bit of trouble with language, that he was suited more for mathematics. And that's when he was being trained to go to pass the engineering exams in Geneva, which he did pass. And Kira and Kevin needed slightly better schooling than it could be afforded, in Lausanne. And then for me, I was 41, it was time to go. It was just the way everything was going. And I am not a person, I don't like complaining. I don't like being a grouch. And you either make a decision and stick with it, or shut up and get on with it. And I made the decision for various reasons that it was time for me to leave.
So not only leaving the club, but leaving Alan.
Yeah. We were talking a few minutes ago, and as I said, I have a very, you might appreciate this by now after our chats, but a wide spectrum, a lot of patience, and I do understand when things don't go right. And, you learn by your mistakes. I think Alan got into a real rut in which he could not pull out. And I think things were disappointing for him to make the right decision, how to go about the club, how to keep it going, and it affected our daily life. And I didn't think it was going to get any better. In fact, it didn't. It got a great deal worse. And I was extremely unhappy. I mean, very unhappy. And I thought, here I am. I'm intelligent. I've got my wits about me. Do something. Don't sit there and be unhappy. And that's when I came down to this area, because there were 3 school systems which would accept children without exams. One was in here in La Tour, Vevey, or a little town going towards Geneva called Rôle. And so I stopped and talked to the headmasters. And when I saw the tour, I thought this was the second most beautiful spot in the world, Lausanne, of course, being first. And that's when I decided this was it. And I dug in. And I did find a very reasonable little apartment. I did want to live near the lake and the mountains, which are, although I'm not a mountaineer by any means, but I love the mountains. The whole idea. And look at it. Look what the view we have, huh? And I see the same view from my kitchen window that I've seen my whole life practically, the Dent de Midi. What more could you ask for? Work just to feed your face. It wasn't worth it. Who needs that much food? You just wanted to absorb, see where you've been. I mean, look. You have to go to Zermatt next. It's the most beautiful view, the Matterhorn. It is so fantastic. And then you can go to all these little villages. And then when you're traveling in the other countries, they're fantastic places. So does the States have. I'm not denying that. It's just different. It's just how you feel. You're not one of a bunch. And because I am a foreigner, I'll always be a foreigner here. They adore my accent in French. They think it's really, my kids are horrified, but they think it's cute. But I think everybody who came here were individuals. They were thinking for themselves. A little bit too much sometimes. Couldn't tell them how to clean the bar. They knew how to do things. They knew. But I think that's why so many of them did well later on.
Everybody likes to talk about it.
Bring up the stories. Maybe I could put a hole in some of them.
Yeah, exactly. That makes it interesting.
So, what were you? We were going down the road of Hollywood. Okay, so let's go down it.
Okay.
So, Clint Eastwood calls these guys to help make a film.
I suspect he had an advertisement someplace, or he got in contact with one of them, then word of mouth, one thing led to another, and they went over. Clint Eastwood did not come to the Vagabond. Believe me, I would have known. But he did. In fact, Rick did a very good job for him, leaping over those, what would you call them, crevasses and what have you, coming down like that. He did a very good job. In fact, I've got the Iger, I've got the internet a team list of everybody who participated. I couldn't resist it. And there was several Vagabonders, you're quite right. There were about 3 or 4 guys who had gone over, had a good time.
In a second. Okay, here we go. Carol, tell us a little bit about the name. Where did it come from?
Well, we didn't have a name for the first few months. When we were buying what was called Les Lilas, which became the Vagabond, we called it Le Chalet for several months. But we had to find a name. And Ellen and I were walking along the high road, just near the Grand Hotel, and we were trying to think of various names that would be attractive to young travelers, but would not be too confusing as sort of an upper price hotel. So we had the Grand on one side, and we had our little place, and I had suggested the Vagabond. And I said, what do you think? And Alan agreed. He fell for it. He said, no, that sounds fairly good. Then I tested it out among some villages who are a bit not too enthusiastic about the name Vagabond. But it seemed to fit in. Then that summer, we had a very sweet couple come, Janine and Claude Simon, S-I-M-O-N. And Claude was a cartoonist for all the big papers in France, and his little initials were S-I-C for Claude Simon backwards. And he designed the original Little Vagabond for us. And we didn't put his initials on for the first year or two, and he said to us, well, could we put his initials on? So we said we would. And then when we repainted the Vagabond, and I can't remember who it was, but one of the boys did the wooden sign for us, which is not Claude's Vagabond exactly. It's this little guy here. And that's why it doesn't have any initials, because it was done by one of the kids staying with us. So he's slightly different. His shoes are a little different than the original Vagabond, which you will see on some of the stickers. And he hung out. He tells a story pretty well, don't you think? Yeah, that's him.
Okay, let's
Happily married couple. Me and my man.
Is that at a good angle, Alan? Is it upright? Okay.
okay, just a minute now. Size you, get you in a nice shot here. Pretty, nice,
It's a lovely spot.
nice, beautiful spot. The girls in the bikinis walking behind.
Alan, I haven't had a bathing suit on in 25 years. I'm appalled. There's no way. I had one. I made my own bikini in Spain. I was told I could get arrested if I wore it.
So we've been learning from people that there were a lot of marriages came out of people that met at the Vagabond Club.
Yeah, and it was the marriages at the Vagabond were quite. A lot of them were very good marriages because you worked with these people. You were together, in good and bad. You saw them at their best when they just might be sober and working. And you saw them when they were fooling around, just playing around. Sports, we had a lot of sport contests in the winter. There were a lot of ski races and sled races, and in the summer there was the climbing, of course, or just the summer sports. So you saw them in all aspects. So if you were friendly with somebody, you did see them at their good points and their weaker points. And there were some very, very good marriages. One of our barmen married our super cook, and quite a few an amazing number stuck together. I mean, I still write to Mr. and Mrs. and their children. As I mentioned, one of our cooks, Larry, he picked grapes on the off season, and he married Sarah, who was a super girl working for us. And 20 years later, their kids came and picked grapes in the same area, just around the corner here. So you do have now, obviously, the kids coming through, or maybe soon grandchildren. That would be something. Oh, that would be just great.
Only Denver was different then too. Everything was different then. Yeah.
Oh, really?
DU.
Oh, okay.
I went from Great Falls down there, and then I transferred. Huge mistake. To Kansas, which is the pits. Don't go to Kansas for anything.
Really?
You like Kansas?
Well, my dad's from Kansas, but he lived there till he was in high school, and then he moved to Denver.
Oh, good move.
That was a smart move.
Yeah, well, his family,
Yeah.
They lived in a little town called McPherson, Kansas.
Oh, jeez.
And his dad.
Well, I didn't like it much, and the Kansans didn't like me much.
Yeah.
And so
Well, Montana's hard to beat, isn't it?
it's hard to beat. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so
You want to try Kathinka?
yeah.
Kathinka, there's no R.
I'm sorry.
Kathinka, there's no
Kathinka,
R in
sorry.
her name.
That's
okay.
Kathinka.
I heard Karen.
Okay.
I'm Kathinka Makela, and I am from Holland, and I was in the Vagabond for quite a few winters. And actually, my maiden name is Tierens because that's what I was, but I was living in Lessa, and I worked as a registered nurse in the hospital, and also worked for a little bit at the Vagabond in the bar, and did a little bit of cooking.
I'm just going to interrupt for a second. I know it's hard because I'm standing here, but if you guys can look like at
Okay.
Alan, not at the camera itself, but sort of
Yeah.
Okay.
like that,
Okay.
then it's consistent.
Okay, well, you ready? I'm Don Makela. I'm from Montana originally. I was traveling around Europe and ran across the Vagabond. Ended up there for a period of between 2 and 3 years. Painted a mural for them of the mountain area, and was generally one of the people that stayed there and enjoyed it. It was a good place.
That's better for the music.
Okay.
I will start. I was when I was finished my nursing training in Holland, I wanted to improve my French, and I got a job in Lausanne, and then I met some people that talked about Lausanne, a Dutch student organization, and I was kind of lonely in Lausanne because the Swiss don't mix very easily, and as a foreigner I wasn't invited to many people's places or so. So I came up for the weekend to ski, and all of a sudden there were all kinds of people to talk to, and I started liking it, and eventually I moved up here and worked in a hospital here, and also met lots of friends here, or met people that I traveled with through Africa, and came back after we were married, met Don here, and well, after we were married we thought we might live here, but that was not a smart idea as a married couple to live here. And so we left after that and only have been back once, and this is the second time since the 60s that we came back to see what it's like.
Yeah, I was traveling around Europe on a motorcycle, and the Vagabond was a known spot for young people traveling around on a budget. I heard about it first in the Munich, in the Oktoberfest. Somebody told me this place was a good place to go. I heard about it again from somebody traveling as I was on a boat from Greece to Italy, and I stopped and worked in Rome and decided to come up at Christmas time, but there was no room, and I didn't get up till January. January 65 was the first time I was here for skiing, and then I was in and out for a couple of years and spent a summer here, and then the winter of 66, 67, and again in 71, 72 after we were married, here in Lausanne, here in the Vagabond.
So, how did you all meet?
Well, I was living in London at the time, and I came back to Switzerland at Christmas time and Easter time to ski before moving here in that summer. But Kathinka was working in Lausanne and coming up in the weekend, and we just met in the bar. Met my wife in a bar. That happens.
But we didn't start going out right away. We sort of met each other, and then Don had to go back. Actually, Don was so broke, he needed money to go back to England, and he asked me very nicely if he could borrow some money from a stable registered nurse.
I don't remember that.
I remember it very clearly. But he was very good because he sent it, within 2 weeks he sent me the money back, and so I knew at least he was honest. And then I went on a trip with 8 other vagabonders through Africa, Middle East and Africa for 3 months, and Don spent the summer here, and when I came back we met up again and sort of started dating on and off for quite a few years, and we ended up both in Canada, and then we finally ended up getting married in Canada in 1970. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We still know a lot of people from the Vagabond. I spent my 4 years in high school, 4 years in university, 3 years in the army. I know maybe 6 people from those times, and I probably can drop in on 20 or 30 people from the time of the Vagabond. Those people, that whole group was very tight, and we've kept in contact with each other quite a bit. Don't know them all, but we know lots. We could go across Canada to the States and meet a lot of people we knew back then.
And what also happened is that they overlapped each other, so we have a very good friend that stayed longer and met other people, and she would invite us all and then introduce each other, and then we became friends even though we were not at the Vagabond at the same time. We had so many memories and things that we understood and had in common that we became friends anyways. That is the nice part. You have that's one place where you all have been, and always find people you do know and have heard of and stories of, so that you feel right away at home with each other.
I don't remember specifically, hanging around with the we didn't hang around too much with the climbers. They were a group of their own, pretty much. But they were in the bar a lot, and we were, and we became pretty good friends. I practiced a little bit in the quarry with them to learn mountain climbing, but it wasn't my direction. I'd rather be skiing, actually.
The only
But-
person was Mick Burke.
Mick Burke was the most.
We
The-
sort
our
of really
friend
got
of
to
ours.
know him. Yeah, he became a friend of ours, not because he was a climber, just as a person. We really liked him, and he was, even though he was hard to understand, for me he was the only one I could really understand.
He
The other
wasn't quite
climbers I
Scottish, he was
couldn't.
from Northern England, and his accent wasn't so thick. He was a very good singer, and he knew all the rugby songs, all the rough songs that I knew, and we used to sing together and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. So he was the most outgoing of all the climbers. Dougal was a good guy, but he was a little insular, and Mick was a very open person. So he was the one we hung out with most in the Vagabond. Well, we already said it, that we keep in touch with a bunch of people. There was a group of people that all knew each other and still know each other, and we were, I guess, friends for life, more or less.
How do you suppose that happened?
We were all in the same spot at the same time. We were all traveling around Europe on a budget, and there was many people doing it, and you connected right away. It was easy to be friends with those people, and then of course you liked some better than others, but you kept
yeah.
in contact with a whole bunch in the end.
I must say I'm similar, but I also felt it's like all in life in general there were people that I didn't like, and there were also people that I think did not behave properly and well, were not people that I would want to hang out with. No, I'm very honest. It was, for me, being from Holland and being maybe a little bit more protected than he was, it was kind of a eye-opener at first. I was a little bit at awe when I all saw this, and I didn't really know what to think about it in the beginning. It was a different world for me than I was ever experienced before. So, but there were enough really nice people you could talk to, but there were people that I
We had
thought
some
were
wild times. It was, again, we were all young and we were all cut loose from our homes, and we didn't go crazy, but we were a little bit on the wild side, maybe. On the mural, I painted
Yeah,
this.
tell us about the mural.
Yeah. Ellen, the owner, asked me to paint. I had done a small one for the old bar, which was much smaller than the one today. I came back in '71, and he said, "Well, let's do a larger one for the fireplace room in the Vagabond." So I was painting the mural at the same time that two friends of mine, one Aussie and one Canadian, were building a fireplace in the same room. And it was a really good time. We were laughing all the time. Those guys putting the rocks together, me doing the painting. We'd start about 10 or 9:30. At noon, the bar would open. We'd go there. We'd get back to work about 2. About 4:30, it's back to the bar. So it took longer than it should have to make the painting and the fireplace. But we had lots of fun. I don't know what you want in this, but under the frame, the guy, one of the guys building the fireplace was named Peter Radford from Australia. And I put under where the frame was going to be over the painting, and I think it's still there. It says, if you want to know, Peter Radford eats shit with a tarnished spoon. Anyway, if they take the frame off, I think it still will be there. Maybe you want to cut that.
Maybe can you describe, we're going to go in there eventually and hopefully do some coverage of this mural and all these little places. You could describe the mural and maybe your process of,
Yeah.
you
The mural, well, of course, I'm an artist, and that's my profession. So I did this mural, and at the time, I did a lot of textural work on the thing. So you'll see that all the trees and a lot of the rocks in the mountains are textured in the painting, and the painting goes from Lausanne all the way over to Caldemas with the Tour de Mayan in the background. That's the famous rock faces here that the climbers used to climb on. and it takes in the whole valley. So, and it shows only 3 lifts. It's all that were there. The gondola that's over there, or the telefreak rather, and a chair and a tea bar was all that was there at the time. That chair and tea are over that part of the village, now gone because it's too low, not much snow, and more of it is over on this side of the village. Those lifts are not on the painting, but the area is there. I think maybe somebody has touched it up and put one of those lifts in, but I'm not sure. But the painting was done in 66, 67, so it's been there 40 some years.
Into the club last night or 2 nights ago. What was it like?
Going back in the club was almost eerie because it's private residence now. They're going to do something with it, but it won't be the Vagabond again. The mural still is there, the fireplace they built still is there, that room is the same, and the bar is very much the same. It looks just like when we left it 40 years ago, only nobody's there. But the bar is the same. I could go up to it and order Beauregards and feel right at home. But they don't have Beauregard anymore.
It was almost disconcerting for me. I felt odd moving back. It seemed like it was another life than I'm wearing now, and coming back, and even the floors, the mats, and the tiles, and everything is the same, and nothing. The pictures behind the bar are the same. It's almost something like a disaster happened and everybody left, and now you move back in after 40 years. So it was very strange for me.
Okay, and because how many married couples can you think of that met at the Vagabond? That's a theme that just keeps coming up.
Yeah, there's at least 5 or 6, maybe more.
Oh, and Jim and
Jim and Kathy.
The one from the States. We watched this hit.
Yeah.
That's 6.
And Dougal and Annie, of course, and
7. Mick
and Beth
8.
met there. So I'd say there's at least 10 couples
that we
would
know that met
some
there.
of them still
and
together
Dave
even.
and Sonia met.
Yeah.
There are lots of couples.
They're all on our computer now.
Is that right?
Yeah, we scanned everything.
Well, I played the guitar a little and sang with it, and so did Bob Bates, the guy who's also in the photos with us. We weren't great. We had a good time, and we were the music for that was there all the time. If somebody came by that was a really good guitar player, I was happy to let them play and listen to them. But when they weren't around, we were around, and we had a lot of fun. We did a pretty good job, I feel. Everybody sang along, and everybody enjoyed it. I got a few free beers out of it. I mean, can't beat that.
And the other thing I think was important, you had a core group always in the Vagabond that were fanatic skiers. Like really people came for the ski, they enjoyed the fun too, but the skiing was their main thing. And I like to think I was one of those. And then there were the people that were just sort of hangers on it for the party, and they have found little jobs in town to do, but they were not interested in skiing. But there was this group that who talk about every night after skiing where they went, how great it was, and that was very important to a big group of people there.
Skiers, good. Okay, now
We spent a lot of time there with especially in the summertime, with not specific things to do. So we made our own entertainment. We had little skits we put on sometimes. Mostly, though, we played a lot of cards, a lot of euchre that was from the Midwest and Toronto area of Canada, and the Aussies all knew euchre. We played it all the time, to the point where I don't need to go in that story.
what's euchre?
It's a game. It's a card game.
I mean, how's it played?
Well, you take all the cards out. Only the cards from 9 to ace is in the deck, and the jack and jick. The 2 jacks of the same color are the highest cards in that round, and then ace, king, queen, and you played for a beer or 2. And it was mostly, as I say, some Canadians, some Aussies, and Midwest United States. But I'd learned it from my brother who went to Purdue. It wasn't in Montana. Aussies
Okay.
playing. Actually, there's this guy named from Wyoming. What's his name? Anyway, a Wyoming guy and I were playing together all the time. We figured that Montana and Wyoming can't be beat. And we played these two Aussies. We're playing for beer. And the game goes to 11, but you can get skunked at 11, right? If you haven't scored any, and you owe twice as much. Like instead of one beer, you have to pay two. So we were playing Peter Radford and Don Christian, and we skunked them. And we said, "All right, you guys, you owe us 2 beers instead of 1." Christian sat up, and he says, "Not an Aussie, mate. An Aussie says when you're skunked, you flush it." And he took it out and laid it on the table. And Peter's on the other side. He had no idea this was coming. He said, "Well, if them's the rules." So he laid his on the table. I'd have rather had the second beer. After that, the girls were watching the game, and it'd get to 9-0, 10-0. The girls would leave the room. They didn't want to see that again.
I think the Aussies were the wildest. I think the Australians were very, very, they were rough, what I call.
I liked it.
They were nice, but no, yeah.
Okay, train, let's go.